Oh, so good.
Eucharist is so awesome.
It really is, right?
It's so awesome. I like it. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, you really got goosebumps.
Yeah, I did, dude. I was like, oh. Welcome to the Gospel Truth. I'm Dean.
And I'm Audrey. And this week is Corpus Christi Sunday.
Corpus Christi.
Yes, happy Corpus Christi Sunday.
Yes.
And that means we are celebrating the solemnity of the most holy body and blood of Christ.
This feels like a really important solemnity.
It really is.
Yeah.
And so that being said, it's a very good time to reflect on the Eucharist and remind us about just how important the Eucharist is when we celebrate Mass every weekend.
Absolutely. I got goosebumps thinking about it. Like
You did.
I did. Because I think like there's just something so beautiful and so powerful about the Eucharist because it just has, I don't know. I'm ready to talk about it.
Yeah,
I'm excited to talk about
it. There's such profound messaging within it and profound
It's profound beauty.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. But before we get into all of that, do you want to remind everyone what the Gospel Truth is?
Yeah, of course.
Why we're here.
Yeah, so the Gospel Truth is all about Audrey and I sharing our thoughts about the faith, the word, happenings in the church. Hopefully by doing that, we can understand our own faith a little bit better, and maybe the viewers can get something out of it as well.
Yeah.
So let's jump into the readings. So one of the common things in the readings is this idea of sacrifice. Mm-hmm. And in the first reading from Exodus, we see Moses discussing the role of sacrifice that was played in the Old Testament. How they would sacrifice young bulls as peace offerings to the Lord. And they would use the blood from those bulls basically to remind themselves of the covenant that God made with them. Right? And then when you transition to the second reading and you see St. Paul in his letter to the Hebrews, St. Paul is comparing those sacrifices in the Old Testament, the blood of goats and calves, to the sacrifice that Jesus made with his own blood. And St. Paul is basically saying, look, if in the past we used the blood of goats and bulls to sanctify those who were defiled, how much more will the blood of Christ sanctify us?
Yeah.
That's such a beautiful power. Yeah, it's such a beautiful comparison. I love that. And so I like that comparison that St. Paul uses. As you know, I'm a big fan of St. Paul and his readings or his letters. Yeah. And then finally in the gospel, we come back to the Last Supper in Mark's telling of the Last Supper. And we see Jesus saying, take it, this is my body. And we see, this is my blood, the blood of the covenant, which will be shed for many. And so we come back to that very beautiful scene, the institution of the Eucharist at the Last Supper before Jesus' Passion. Yeah. So I love the messaging here, and I love just the beautiful scenes. Like I've used the word beautiful a lot, but it's just the Eucharist is such a profound mystery that we can't, again, it's something we can't ever truly understand, but there's just so much power in the Eucharist. It's such a meaningful part of a Catholic life. Yeah,
and I mean the readings this weekend, they're just so, they just tie in so beautifully together.
Yeah.
And I know some, I'll be honest, some weekends where I'm just I am a little lost and what does this reading mean and how does it tie into the gospel? But this one, I feel like, just because we feel so passionately about of Corpus Christi, I feel like it's just really speaking to us this weekend.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the great things about this solemnity is that it allows us to celebrate the sacrifice that Jesus made for us and continues to make for us.
Yes. And so let's not forget when we say the sacrifice that Jesus continues to make for us, that we as Catholics believe that Christ is truly present in the Eucharist. It's actually what really defines us as Catholics, right?
Yes, that it's not just a symbol of Jesus' body and blood.
It is.
We truly believe as Catholics that when it is consecrated, the body or the bread and the wine are what's called transubstantiated.
Yeah.
That's a big word, but it has a very powerful idea behind it that the body and blood of Jesus are truly present, right? That bread and wine has actually been changed into his body and blood.
Yeah.
And so he physically there with us.
Every single time we celebrate the Eucharist.
Exactly.
So if you really, really think, and we'll get into this a little more later, but like it's not just a symbol, right? Like he's truly present there, and he's continually sacrificing his own body and blood for us so that we can be with him.
Yeah. And he's giving himself to us.
Yeah.
Right? And there's so much that is packed into the Eucharist.
Yep.
Right? Like, or the Eucharistic celebration. Right? Number one, I think when you're doing the Eucharistic prayer, you have to remember that the Eucharist allows us to have a memorial of the sacrifice that Jesus made.
Yeah, we say it right in the words that we hear the priest say, right? He says, "Do this in memory of me."
Right?
Yeah.
And so every time you go to the Eucharist, you are reminded that Jesus did a lot for us. He gave his life for us. And in remembering him, we ensure that that sacrifice is not forgotten.
Yes.
Yep.
And then there's also number two, just this idea of like cleansing and healing.
Yeah.
Right? From the Eucharist.
Yeah, I think if we come back again to that second reading, right? St. Paul literally says, like, you know, if Jesus gives his blood, the blood of Christ, then we'll be able to offer ourselves unblemished to God. We will cleanse our conscience, right? And that comes back again to that whole idea. Like St. Paul even says that Christ is the mediator of that new covenant. Remember that new covenant that we mentioned a couple episodes ago? Yeah. That he is there to forgive our sins.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's also a cleansing act associated with that Eucharist.
Yes. Yeah. There are a few prayers we actually say before receiving the body and blood of Christ.
Yes.
Right? Like, Lord, I'm not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but only say the word and I shall be healed.
My soul shall be healed.
Yes.
Yeah, I think one of our priests mentioned, I forget who, but I remember hearing in a homily, that the last prayer, the last word of the last prayer that we say before we receive the Eucharist is healed.
Yes.
Right?
And my soul shall be healed.
Actually, I think we got to give a shout out to, is it Father Michael?
Father Michael from All Saints.
Right?
Yes.
He said that.
Beautiful.
Right? So there's a healing aspect to the Eucharist as well, which is so beautiful.
Yeah.
Right? And then I guess the third thing that we want to call out about the Eucharist is that I think from the Second Vatican Council, like way back in the 1960s, they mentioned that the Eucharist is the source and summit of Christian life.
Yeah.
That's a two-parter.
Yeah, there are two things there, right?
Two-parter there. Source and summit.
Yeah.
And that's such an important quote. Like, you can't just blow by that.
Yeah, it's and let's talk about like the first part of that, right? The source, origin.
Yes.
Is basically what that means, right? And so, the Eucharist and celebrating the Eucharist together is the origin for us to experience God's grace, God's love, and his never-ending sacrifice that he continuously makes for us.
Right?
Like mass after mass, every time we celebrate that.
I like that. Source as the origin.
Yeah.
It's like, it's where we get all of that vigor and energy that the church and Christ is able to give us.
Yeah, it truly is. It's like the fountain and the origin.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's just like this never-ending flowing fountain.
Absolutely.
Of all of that, right?
And then summit. Summit is the peak.
Yes.
Right? Like, you go to Mount Everest, what do? You try and summit Mount Everest. You try and reach the peak.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a big deal.
The Eucharist is so much more than that, right? The Eucharist is the summit of our life, which means it's like if you're interpreting it, it's the single most important thing that you can do is to fully experience the Eucharist. Like, that's a big deal.
Yeah, it's not meant to be taken lightly.
No,
at all,
not at all, right? And it can be easy to do that because sometimes you go to church on Sunday and you just see it as an obligation or something that you just do because you have to.
Yeah, and it feels what's the word? It's like mundane, or you go through the process motions, and the motions because it's muscle memory and it's obviously an obligation, but like, we say the words because we've memorized it, but are we truly listening to the words that we're saying versus like just hearing it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and are we truly
feeling
present when we feel or when we receive the Eucharist? Or is it just, I'm in line again for communion,
this is what's next.
This is what we do next, right? It's so much more important than that.
Yeah.
And so, it's a reminder of just how big the Eucharist is.
It is. And I mean, it's our moment to get to physically be with God. And how oh my gosh, I almost cursed. How amazing is that, right? To physically be present with God. Like sometimes, and I know I've been there in the past, right? Like everyone has had their own Catholic journey, and there are times I'm just going through the motions. But I remember having a really great conversation with Father Jim Sullivan, and just watching him, celebrate Mass. Sometimes you can see him get a little choked up and overwhelmed by the idea. And we've had conversations with him and what a beautiful sacrifice that is for him to make every Sunday, and every time we celebrate Mass, right? He is literally present. We are literally in his presence, and how amazing and beautiful is that?
Yeah, we're super lucky that Christ and that God is willing to do that for us every single time Mass is celebrated. It's just it's awesome.
And not only are we just like in his presence, but like we become one with him.
Yeah, we receive true food and true drink.
Yeah.
Right? Like I forget what the quote is, but it's like you get the true actual sustenance from Christ's body.
It's if you really think about it, and for him to do that every Sunday for us, and every time we celebrate Mass, no matter how bad, however bad we're feeling about the things we've done,
or even if the world is going whatever's happening in the world, we were still celebrating Mass in the midst of the pandemic. Christ was still giving himself to us, even though we couldn't necessarily even physically be there at Mass. Mass was still being celebrated. Christ was still giving his body and blood to us.
And there's something so beautiful about that actually gets me a little choked up to think about, right? This is the one constant in our lives that remains truly beautiful and truly untouched, and can never be what's the word, stained by the realities of whatever's going on in our lives and our world.
I love that,
and it's beautiful.
So I guess this is our challenge to you before we go today, is hopefully you can really think about and consider and meditate on the Eucharist when you go to Mass next time. And really think about the sacrifice that Jesus has made for you. Because it is such a beautiful and profound thing.
And just remember that this is a moment where he is truly physically present with us. And we can be one with him. And it's a very beautiful thing. And sometimes it's an easy thing to forget when you go through the motions. So we hope this week and all weeks moving forward, you take time to really reflect and remember that. All
right. Cool. So thanks everyone. I know this was kind of a longer one, but there was a lot to unpack.
There's it's really so much. Great.
We could do a whole lecture.
But we won't take more of your time. But again, thank you for taking time to listen to us, and we look forward to sharing more next week with y'all.
All right, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.